Welcome to Design Fusion's Solid Edge blog. This is part 3 of a 3-part series on weldments and solid edge. Part 3 introduces you to weldments in the part and draft environment. Whether you are working in an ordered or synchronous environment, you have the capability to add weld beads to your part or create a part that only includes weld beads. If you want the weldment features to be contained in a separate part file, you can create a new part file in place. As shown on the slide here, you do this by using the Create Part in Place command. The weldment commands in the part environment are located on the Home tab in the Solids group on the Suite pull-down list. The Stitch Weld command and Label Weld command are not available in the synchronous paradigm. However, you can use the integrated modeling method to switch from the synchronous paradigm to the ordered paradigm if you need to use the Stitch Weld or Label Weld command. Weld bead features can exist in a sheet metal file, but you must create these using Switch to Part, just like you would create any other part modeling feature. When a weld bead is defined in part, the draft environment will recognize them as weld beads and be able to extract the mask properties for them. Some additional benefits of assembly weld features in part include full display control of weld beads, full control of material properties, and the capability to use duplicate component to put weld beads on similar components quickly. Let's have a quick look at this in Solid Edge. I have this small assembly that I'll use to show you how to make weld beads in a separate part file. I start by selecting the Create Part in Place command. I'll use the bigraphic input option to define the origin of the weld bead part. On the key point filter, I'll select the midpoint option and place the origin of the part at the midpoint of the brace. I'll give this part a name. I'll call it weld bead. When I hit save, I'm taken into the part environment. Notice that I have the underlying assembly components visible. Also notice that this is a synchronous part, so I can only place fillet or groove welds. I'll select the fillet weld command. I'll use the default 6.35 mm equal setback default options. I'll select the cylindrical face and the planar face and accept them. I then select the faces of the brace that I want welded and accept them. I click Preview and Finish. To distinguish these weld beads in the assembly, I'll go to the Style palette and select the weld bead color and drag it onto the weld bead part. I can now close and return to the assembly. To demonstrate an advantage of creating the weld bead as a separate part, I'll switch to a new configuration to show the entire assembly. Switching the configuration caused the weld bead part to be hidden, so I'll just turn it back on. I can now use the Duplicate Component command, which allows me to select the weld bead parts on this brace and duplicate them on all identical braces. As you can see, this was a lot more efficient than placing an assembly feature on each brace. You create weldment assembly drawing views the same way you create assembly drawing views. The draft environment offers some unique commands to allow users control over the weldment assembly views. For example, when placing a drawing view of a weldment assembly using the Drawing View wizard, you can use the Show Assembly Features option to control the display of material removal features. Or when editing a drawing view, you can use the Show Assembly Features option on the Model Options tab in the Drawing View Properties dialog box. You can control the weld bead display in a drawing view by one of two ways. You can use display configurations to control the display of weld beads and material addition features in an assembly drawing view, or you can go to the Display tab in the View Properties, select the weld bead parts or assembly features from the parts list, and uncheck the Show options to hide the selected weld beads. Notice that in this illustration, I've named the weld bead parts as weld bead. However, these could be named differently. When working with section views, you have access to independent hatch and fill display controls. These are found on the Edge Display tab in the Solid Edge Options dialog box, as illustrated on this slide. The weld symbol command places a standard weld symbol on an element. You can set options for controlling the type of weld symbol you want to place. It's important to note that the weld symbol can be independent from the geometry or tied to the geometry. Let's have a quick look at this in Solid Edge. I've opened this fillet weld example from part 2 of this blog series. I'll use this assembly to create a draft file with a Weldment. I'll select the Drawing of Active Model command, and I'll use the default setting to run the drawing view wizard. In the draft file, I'll click on the drawing view wizard options and notice that the Show Assembly Feature option is on by default. I'll click OK and place the view. Next, I'll go into the View Properties. In the Properties dialog box, on the Display tab, you can select the Fillet feature from the parts list. You can then uncheck the Show option. You will have to update the view, but notice that the weld bead is now hidden. To turn this back on, I'll go back into the View Properties and show it again. Once again, you will have to update the view. Next, I'll place a weld symbol. Notice that I can define the weld symbol much like defining a weld label. I'll accept the default and click OK. To extract the existing weld info from the weld bead, I toggle on the Tie to Geometry option in the vertical command bar. Now when I place the symbol, it extracts the size and length of the bead for me. This option provides you with a symbol that is associative with the bead, so if you change the bead size or the length, the symbol will adjust with it. This blog series has been a quick introduction to Weldments. For a more detailed look at Weldments, you can register for the Weld Workshop on the Design Fusion training page. Want to learn more? Please sign up to our customer portal at the website listed here, where you have access to knowledge-based articles, tips and tricks, how-to articles, and much more. If you need additional support, contact our support team at support@designfusion.com or call us at 1-877-215-1883.